Space travel fascinates us. Ever since we learned to fly, reaching further and higher, reaching for the stars, has captured not only our imagination, but our brightest minds and some tax dollars. One of the 2 astronauts with the most space flights, the first Latin American immigrant to go to space, is Costa Rican, like us, believe it or not. When you see someone like you achieve their dreams, it suddenly becomes possible. It suddenly becomes within reach. So of course, when I was a kid, I really wanted to be an astronaut. Not like your average kid that wants to be an astronaut, but as in actually considering this even in the early years of high school. But for me, the path was just too much of a long shot. And then being one of the fraction of a percentage of people who apply to the astronaut program and get selected. So it felt like committing my life to chasing a dream that I would have no control over or little control over. It just felt not worth it. But instead of that selection process, all you need now is $250,000. From the surface, this billionaire space race might seem like a battle of egos, and it kind of is, I guess. But space is only the new battleground for them to measure their spaceships. But what's in it for us?
Explorers, pioneers, not carriers. How fervent their hatreds. The only home we've ever known.
Well, I have here a reservation for a flight to the moon.
Pan Am began taking reservations for the first flight to the moon in 1968. For the airline, it kind of made perfect sense. Pan American Airlines had been the first in many things. The first in crossing the Pacific, the first in crossing the Atlantic, and now the first reaching the moon. So people flooded to Pan Am and made 93,000 reservations for this first flight to the moon. It was a great marketing gimmick, with enough hope for it to be true.
The switchboard was jammed for days, which wasn't too good, you know.
And why were people so desperate? Well, this was the 60s, and the space race was in full swing. The Cold War had instilled the idea that good and evil were now battling above us, and back then, space was the new thing. Technology and culture were advancing hand in hand. Look at the recent blockbuster Dune. The novel came out in 1965, and it coincided with the first images of Earth from outer space. The novel tackled the environment, religion, and society in a fascinating way. Plus, combined with our first views of our planet, this book sparked this wave of interest in the future of space travel. Images were fueling inspiration all around. Stanley Kubrick fell in love with NASA's high-resolution photographs of the lunar surface. In fact, these very images inspired him and Arthur C. Clarke to finally write the script for 2001: A Space Odyssey. And the movie even beat the lunar landing by an entire year. And the lunar landing was huge. When a man landed on the moon in 1969, suddenly everything became possible, from houses in space to moving to another planet. And then there was Star Wars. It was so important that it would influence actual space exploration for years to come. Even NASA named some of its devices after the saga, such as the Twin Ion engine or the TIE thrusters. And we're leaving out many films and sagas that made us dream about space. Now, Pan Am would go bankrupt in '91, and then that flight to the moon was, either way, nowhere near possible. But the dream didn't die. It did mean that for us, regular human beings, it maybe wasn't for us. Just like high school me, most of humanity accepted that we wouldn't be traveling to space in our lifetimes. At least we ordinary people did, because for billionaires, the reality was different. Isn't it always, though? Take Space Adventures, for example. This is an American space tourism company that existed since '98. It's the first company to take a civilian to space. Now, if you're not a space buff, then you might not have heard of Dennis Tito. He is the first space tourist ever. That is the first person to go to space with no purpose other than going.
Once Dennis Tito is flown, people will know that it's possible for them to fly as commercial space travelers.
And Tito's venture into space was not an easy one, as you can imagine. First, the US didn't want him to train because NASA considered that sending a civilian into space just wasn't right. So Tito went to the Russians instead. And they said, sure, da. And so Dennis Tito became the first tourist. Not only that, he was the first civilian in the International Space Station. After Tito, 3 other billionaires took to space with space adventures between 2001 and 2009. Now, while the media coverage of all of these flights had been enthusiastic, it still had this aura of impossibility. Plus, it wasn't even a race, it was just this one company, one tourist at a time, and they were just using existing government technology. Now, Guy Labiltre's trip coincided with the ISS increasing long-term cruise in space, so there was really no more room for billionaires to be floating around. And thus, the age of space tourism would go silent for over a decade.
Planet Earth, it is now back home, and you can see on your screen our 2 fast boats racing out to the capsule, now in recovery.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video, but I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is Chermogul. We've been truly using Chermogul for years to track our SaaS expenses. We befriended their team, and now they agreed to sponsor our channel. Now, the reason why we use Chermogul is that we generate revenue from a lot of sources, SaaS and non-subscription revenue, and we consolidate all of that in their platform. So Chermogul lets us run cohort tables, lifetime value reports, and even filter on customer sources. For example, we can use the UTM tags to track the lifetime value of customers who came from a specific campaign or from a specific landing page, or maybe a specific country. Now, for companies with under $10,000 in MRR, you can use Chermogul completely free by signing up at chermogul.com/Slidebean. If you have over $10,000 in MRR, you can use the code Slidebean to write off $600 of your first year on Chermogul. Thanks, Chermogul, for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to the story.
Nearly full. I've been so fortunate.
You've heard enough about them already. 3 billionaires are leading the space race. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson with their respective companies. These are all entrepreneurs turned billionaires. While Elon's vision for SpaceX transcends space tourists, they go into space internet and Mars, it almost looks like Bezos and Branson are just in it for the cheap thrills. Not cheap though, but let's start with the oldest one, Blue Origin. So Jeff Bezos created the company in 2000, 6 years after founding Amazon. And it wasn't surprising, in his high school graduation speech, he laid out his goal. One day, Bezos would build space hotels and colonies to vacate Earth. For years, nobody knew much about Blue Origin. They were working in secrecy, in part focused on developing VTVL rocket technology. So VTVL stands for vertical takeoff, vertical landing. Now, the space shuttle was VTHL, or vertical takeoff, horizontal landing. Blue Origin was also focused on supplying rocket engines for other customers, including the US government. Now, nailing one of these contracts is vital. As we'll see later, space isn't only about who gets there first, it's about making money.
New information. Blue Origin, a space transportation company, will invest $200 million in Huntsville. It will also bring
Jeff Bezos,
400
one of
new
our
jobs.
country's truly great innovators and entrepreneurs.
Now, the second company is SpaceX, which Elon Musk founded in 2002. They were $200,000 away from running out of money, and Elon Musk had to pitch in with his own capital to save it. We have this full video on their story. Now, like Bezos, Musk has had an obsession with space exploration, but his vision is a little different. He doesn't want Earth to be a theme park. Instead, he wants to colonize Mars. He wants to colonize Mars, as crazy as it sounds. Musk also said that he has plans to visit Mars before he dies. Now, I know that people hate Elon, and they have the right to do so. Elon bros are not helping.
It's right here, heaven on earth.
But come on, man, how many people in the world have dreamed their entire lives of setting foot on another planet? And how many of them will achieve it, riding on a company that they helped build? That's pretty unique. Now, I ask myself this question all the time. Imagine Slidebean goes unicorn, I joined the 3 Club. Would I spend half my fortune on going to Mars? Absolutely yes, even if it's a one-way ticket. Now, like Blue Origin, SpaceX also wants to nab many government contracts. Their goal is to provide shuttle services to space stations along with engines. So in this aspect, it's kind of head-to-head with Blue Origin, and this battle has been intense. Now, Bezos and Musk have had this very vocal rivalry. There's one thing that Musk has to his advantage. Whether you like him or not, he has created a cult following that Bezos just has failed to replicate. Musk is nerdy, he's a marketing genius and has done insane stunts. And while somewhat awkward, most people don't perceive him as another douchebag like Jeff Bezos. But there's a third billionaire in our space race. That's Richard Branson. Branson owns the newest of the companies, having founded Virgin Galactic in 2004. Now, his goal is more down to earth. He wants to create more accessible flights for regular people. By regular people, I mean that one seat still costs $450,000, but the company hopes that the price will go down in time. Eventually, Branson wants everybody to have a chance to go to space, but with a different approach. Both SpaceX and Blue Origin provide most of the flights in a rocket and a capsule. Virgin Galactic wants to do it in this space plane with a more traditional, heavier-than-air design. Also, out of the three, Virgin Galactic brags as the first to take passengers on space flights, but as you'll see later, it's where things get more complicated. This is the Kármán line. Its name comes from Theodor von Kármán, a physicist who in 1957 was the first to make efforts in defining the limits of outer space. On July 11th, 2021, Richard Branson took off in Virgin Galactic and reached the height of 86 kilometers or 53 miles from Earth. Now, technically, that's not space, at least according to the FAI. Blue Origin feasted on this. After the successful flight, the rival company said that there should be an asterisk on it. And 9 days later, Bezos took to space in its ship, the New Shepard. By the way, rumor has it that Branson actually rushed his launch just to beat him. And it made perfect sense, but in the end, it's all about these numbers. On July 20th, 2021, Bezos wore a cowboy hat, we have no idea why, to space. The New Shepard reached an altitude of 105 kilometers or 65 miles, effectively crossing the Kármán line. So from an outsider perspective, Branson went first, but Bezos reached space first.
Here, catch. Oh, yeah.
I was once a child with a dream, looking up to the stars. Now I'm an adult in a space.
So yes, these bragging rights can easily get nonsensical at times, but we're missing one other billionaire, Elon Musk.
But my goal is not to set myself up. My goal is to open up space for humanity and ultimately set us on the path to becoming a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species.
He does say that he wants to die on Mars, but not on the first landing. Now, SpaceX wants to become a spaceflight provider for governments and for private companies alike. But you see, taking things to space has been very expensive for many reasons. So Elon Musk wants to break that, and that's how he's gotten into a rivalry with Jeff Bezos. They're both competing to make the cheapest provider for the US government, and that's not easy. So they've gotten into some bitter battles. First, SpaceX won the right to use the LC-39A rocket launch platform, but then Blue Origin sued them. SpaceX then sued Blue Origin back to invalidate a patent to land ships at sea, and they won. So landing at sea is vital if something fails, so you don't burn half a town. So as you can see, it's not all about the tourists. There are some big bucks in space exploration, and as private companies improve and their technology improves, they can guarantee a much bigger payday. And that is why SpaceX has been busy breaking other boundaries. For example, it was the first private company to ferry cargo and astronauts to space. SpaceX is also the first company to take an entirely private citizen flight to space. Inspiration 4 consisted of 4 non-astronauts orbiting Earth for 3 days. And this was another first in history. So yes, Musk isn't donning an astronaut suit, but SpaceX too has hoped to jump on this space tourism wagon. And one thing is clear, this is really just the beginning, for better or worse. Now, if the name Yulia Peresild doesn't sound familiar, it will in no time. She and director Klim Shipenko are the first to film a movie in space. It's about an astronaut surgeon who performs surgery in orbit. It sounds like a good plot, but it's real, that's the whole point. It happened. On October 17th, 2021, the cast landed on Earth after shooting in the ISS for 12 days. So yes, we are at this point in history. When we were kids, space seemed like this far-fetched reality that wouldn't happen in our lifetime. Now it's much more closer. And I, for one, am very excited about it.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful.